Hello, everybody. This is Monica Paolini, and I'm here today with Chris Lewis to talk about sensing. And this is part of our Inclusively talks. And we have a very special guest today. It's Saibal Chakraburtty, and he's the Director of Product Management at Cognitive Systems. And this is I think it's a really interesting discussion today, which is somewhat different from ones we had before when we often talked about specific services or the workplace. Here, we're really talking about an access technology, a new access technology, which is sensing, and how that helps with inclusion. And basically being able to provide services that help people that are either elderly, disabled, or we'll get into that. But I'm very interested because this is really a case where we can show that the technology is really helping all of us, or it has the potential to help all of us, because this is not really commercial yet, but we are really getting there. Actually, it is commercial, but the services that we're going to talk about, most of them are not commercial yet, but we are on a good direction here. So you all know, I'm sure, Chris, and so actually, Chris, do you want to introduce yourself for people that are new, and then we'll get to Saibal?
I'm very happy to. Thanks, Monica, and love to be here again. So the background behind Inclusively was how the accessibility work that I've been looking at for the last 10 years as a blind person and as a telecom analyst, how that's evolved to be able to build a more inclusive future. And as you said, we start to look at things very much from the how do we get the devices to be more accessible, how do we get applications to be more accessible. And what I love about this topic is that actually this is something which is going to be built into effectively the environment around us, which will help using sensing to actually add services, add features, add value, add independence. And I think that's perhaps one thing we don't emphasize often enough, is that by creating a more inclusive future, you give people independence. And and if you talk to someone like me with a vision problem or an elderly person, maintaining their independence is incredibly important. And so any services that we can wrap around people either in their living environment or out and about in society or in their workplace, I think is going to be very interesting. So yeah, very, very happy to be here. Looking forward to the discussion. And I guess, Saibal, over to you. Can you give us some background on yourself and then on what you're doing and the technology you've created and this whole notion of sensing?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm Saibal Chakraburtty. I am the director of product, as mentioned. So what attracted me to cognitive? So first, I should say that we're based in Waterloo, Ontario, because of the University of Waterloo that has a high number of computer science and math graduates. We have a bit of a technology boom here. So there's a lot of high-profile companies and startups that are here. And I've been in this area all my life, and I've been always a product manager. So for me, my passion is understanding technology, understanding problems and market, and joining the two together. And I had worked at a company where I was tracking medical instrumentation. So this is medical tools inside the body, using electromagnetic tracking technology and also infrared optical tracking technology. So I've had this mindset of metrology, and what made me interested, or how cognitive came on my radar, is they're in that same space. Like they're trying to solve this problem, but now they're looking at it in the home, is how do we track people within the home to do a variety of different use cases, which we can talk about. So that's how I came to cognitive. I've been here for several years now. My main responsibility is to work with my team as we think about how to integrate what we've built with tier one ISP partners, but also look at other novel ways to bring Wi-Fi sensing within the home.
Absolutely.
So tell us then, what is Wi-Fi sensing?
Yeah, really.
Let's get to the nub of the matter.
Yeah, really, really good question. So we are all bags of water. So there's no nice way to put it, is we're bags of water, and we will attenuate signals in the home. So our home with Wi-Fi, we're blanketed by radio frequency signals that we can't see, but we're disturbing them. And we've developed a method where we can measure those disturbances, and through our proprietary algorithms and using machine learning, we can then take these disruptions and attribute it to motion relative to a device. So we can tell you there's motion happening in the kitchen, motion happening in the living room, etc., all using software. So there's no incremental hardware needed. Our goal is to make it easy to deploy without needing additional hardware.
Now, let me just say something here. The way I think about it sometimes it's like a radar, basically. But it is not like a location-based services, because sometimes when I talk to people about sensing, they think of a location-based service. This is much more granular, much more accurate. It's kind of, again, it's a little bit like a radar, right?
Well, yeah. So if you to simplify it, so our software resides on, depending on deployment models, but the most common one that's in market right now through some of our partners, we write firmware that sits resident on your main router. So we are working very closely with ISP partners to make sure that our code is running there. As soon as our algorithm is running on that router or mesh device, every stationary internet connected device in your home automatically becomes a sensor. So think of it as motion sensors or PIR sensors without having the limitations such as worrying about line of sight, worrying about disruptions through windows and either IR noise. We can now almost magically detect motion in between that router running our software and a stationary internet connected device.
And another question, there is sensing also for cellular networks, 5G and mostly 6G. How is that different?
Yeah, my understanding of that technology is that's more for macro position detection. What we're really looking for is smaller measurements or smaller motion detection within the home. So we're interested in, and we'll discuss this with elder care, but we want to know if someone is breathing, if someone is moving position, like while they're sleeping, they're moving around in the bed. Using cellular, this is not, we just don't have the right resolution in order to detect this. So our goal is really to look for these fine details that are within the home. Also with Wi-Fi, it's quite ubiquitous. So with Wi-Fi, you can also, with extenders, ensure that you have complete coverage. I know I live out in the country, I have very little cellular signal in my home, whereas I'm lucky, strangely, to have fiber running to my house, and I've got wall-to-wall Wi-Fi. So having complete coverage is also very important.
And did this come out? You mentioned medical earlier, and obviously I've been thinking about this for some time. There was a great device that we had. You put between the plug and a kettle, so it sent a signal to a carer whenever someone turned the kettle on in the morning. Or we've seen devices like called a canary, which I have for my mother-in-law, funny enough, which is just a motion detector that she's got up and she's moved. Mm-hmm. So has this come from a medical background? Or
no, that was more my background in technology.
Right.
Where this actually came from is former BlackBerry radio engineers. So these are engineers that were working to solve other problems. This is optimizing battery consumption, how to look at different cellular radios on a BlackBerry device. It's funny because we probably all have iPhones at the moment or Androids and no BlackBerries, but that was the humble beginnings of this company. And what had happened was key engineers had decided or had determined through their research is there is this channel state information. So it's a quality of service feed where they determine that there's perturbations due to motion. And that was kind of the humble beginnings of this, is how can they take that learning, build a solution for motion tracking within the home. It was agnostic of medical. It was
Sure.
initially thinking about home insights. So home insights is understanding how spaces are being used in my home. It could be used as a proxy to a security system. So if I'm not at home, I will get an alert that motion has been detected in the living room. There's also tracking, well, tracking is the wrong word, but understanding how loved ones are using the space. So for example, if there's movement from one area of the home to another area of home, or there's lack of movement, those insights are very interesting. And
So,
that's
so
how
how,
that's how the
so
company's
how, how does the data, the tracking data that you pick up, how does that get fed? Does that get fed back to the person in the home or to a carer? There's an information flow question here, isn't there?
Yeah,
So,
good question. So the way we've architected our system, all processing happens on the edge. So this firmware that we write and is resident on the router through our ISP partners, that firmware is doing all motion calculation. So it's looking at the channel state information between the router and stationary internet connected devices. It's making the determination of where motion is happening. Now, in order to feed this to a mobile app, we then need to speak to the cloud such that we can now show you the insights either in real time or historic data that shows up in a mobile app, such that you can be outside of the home and get those insights.
so the way my brain's leaping here is that actually I can finally know what my guide dog is doing downstairs during the night and how he moves around without ever putting cameras
Yeah, that's
on.
actually that's really interesting because we are speaking with one partner in the UK, and they are very interested in trying to solve this problem. Like there are people who actually want to know what their pets are doing when they're not at home. And what's very interesting is as we were doing our own research, we actually have cameras. So cameras are just for our own internal research purposes. We want to get the ground truth. We want to see what the animals are doing and compare that to what our system is detecting. And it was a revelation for people. People realized that when they weren't home, the cats were jumping on the counters. So it's really interesting to see this video and then look to see what the graphs are showing in real time with Wi-Fi motion. But yeah, definitely to know what your pets are doing when you're not home is an interesting use case.
Excellent.
I actually know that because I actually did that. It was absolutely stunning to know what the cats were doing when we're not watching, just not in the room. It
Yes.
was just like absolutely amazing. Now, so can you tell us a little bit, because this is going to give us a little bit of background in terms of what kind of services you are developing that are not related to elderly or disabled people, because you said, as you said, that tracking pets, tracking security, I guess kids, just so that we have a sort of a bigger picture. Because I think that one of the reasons why sensing is so interesting is for the sort of inclusivity story is that it's not just for that. It's just the scope is so much bigger that this is only a part of it, but I think it's helpful to think about it in the wider context.
So Wi-Fi sensing was first made available in the market through our partner Plume in 2020. They work with tier 2 ISPs. They largely offer home extenders to ensure that you have wall-to-wall coverage of Wi-Fi in your home. But then they've added services on top of that. And one of those services is actually Wi-Fi motion. And what we're trying to solve there through that, that feature offering is to get motion detection alerts. So we call this offering Home Aware. Think of it as a do-it-yourself security solution. So without needing a monitoring cost, without needing to install cameras, I can, through Wi-Fi motion, get motion detection alerts. I can get live motion on my screen. So if I'm remote, not at home, I get an alert. I can see squiggle lines that say there's motion happening in the kitchen, motion happening in the living room. And those type of insights, I can then start asking questions. I can ask questions, well, is there an intrusion happening? Or are my children home? Are my children home early from school? And so I have teenage children. And if for some reason someone comes home early, I can see that someone's in my home. And this is very privacy friendly because I don't actually know who is home. I know that someone is home. And then so what I can do is immediately text my son and say, are you home early? Because I see motion happening in the kitchen. So that allows those conversations. We also have motion history, custom motion alerts. So custom motion alerts is I can say for a given period of time, I don't expect any motion or I expect motion, and give me alerts as this criteria is met. And then I guess what's important here is that localization. So localization is, again, motion happening in a very specific part of my home. So that's our core offering. We call it Home Aware. Through our partners, they rebrand it and they sell it as their own. Where we are with Caregiver Aware is now that Wi-Fi motion is being understood, and I say being understood in the sense that through the partner Plume and some direct engagements, we have about 160 service providers where Wi-Fi motion is being deployed. We are in over 13 million households. So there's an increased awareness of Wi-Fi motion. And once we have our technology running on the router, our partners are now interested in additional services, and Caregiver is one of those additional services. So most of our partners are now thinking, how do we use Wi-Fi motion to specifically target the elderly or loved ones who are living by themselves, and to have this greater level of insights such that as a caregiver, I can have peace of mind.
Absolutely, and it's elderly, also people with different illnesses that need to have, you need to sort of see what's going on. And so maybe we can talk a little about, so how is that you can help elderly people or whoever needs more sort of tracking?
Yeah, I think one of the learnings that happened since the pandemic is understanding that our elderly prefer to age in place, to be by themselves, have independence, and have the dignity of being on their own as long as possible. So that's an insight that was made painfully more obvious during the pandemic. And because of that, like we were thinking of how Wi-Fi motion can help reinforce that. And I think what's really important is understanding trending of motion. So often, and I'll speak specifically about the elderly for a second, but specifically about elderly, what is really important to know is when something is amiss and something doesn't fit regular trending. So it could be something as sleep interruptions. And I'll give a good example. My parents are unfortunately no longer around, but my father is the kind of person who would never report a health issue. So he would never tell anybody that he's not feeling well. And what I can do is, if I'm measuring remotely how he's sleeping, and the benefit is he doesn't need to wear a wearable. He's not wearing a wearable. It's passive. I can then see the insights over time as to how he's sleeping and measure and see that there's interruptions. And then this opens up a conversation. I can ask my father, why haven't you been sleeping? And the first thing he's going to say, I'm sleeping fine. And I can show him the data and say, no, and look, there's interruptions. I see motion happening in the bathroom, which means you're probably using the bathroom more often than usual. So this really helps to have that discussion, and it becomes an early indicator of something problematic. So then I can urge them, let's go see your doctor and let's speak to your doctor. On the flip side, I have a mother had a mother who's very dramatic. So she would over-report. She would say, I didn't sleep a wink last night. Where now I could say, well, the data shows actually you slept quite fine. So perhaps she has anxieties through the day that need a discussion and to pull in healthcare professionals.
And Saibal, in that example, where is the data being shown? Because you're talking about an ecosystem where your software is installed on a router, it's capturing data, it's going back to the cloud somewhere, to the edge, capturing it, and then it's rendering that information into an app. And is that app provided by the ISP? Is it provided by special carer
Yeah,
package?
so
Or...
there are several different ways to market, and I think that's one of the flexible, like the flexibility on how we've architected this. So this could be available through the ISP. We also know is that there are some startups who are focused on solving problems such as elder care. What we know is they don't want to have to rely on that router router having our firmware on it. They want to supply their own devices. So we actually do have smart plugs. And with smart plugs, it's a different architecture, but the problems we're solving are the same. So what this now means is if, let's say my parents are in a home without without Wi-Fi service with a partner of cognitive, now what I can do is I can install a device such as a smart plug. And a smart plug, they connect to the local household Wi-Fi. I can now get the same level of motion detection alerts. And everything is coming back to me as the care provider coming to my mobile phone. And where this becomes interesting is I can share this burden with, well, burden's the wrong word. It's really peace of mind, right? It's really understanding that my parents are moving when they should be moving. They're healthy. There's no anomalies in their day-to-day lives. Like this probably, burden is the wrong word. It more alleviates some guilt because everyone's really busy.
Yeah.
And I don't have to feel guilty about not visiting home as often as I should have because
So
now I have some peace of mind.
So the question then is, it occurred to me when you said this is called the care package. So actually, the independent living is much more powerful because my mum still, she's 90, lives on her own. She, to be independent is so important to her. So the independent selling it, that's the way of selling it to her. But of course, from selling it to me, my brothers and sisters, that's the peace of mind issue, isn't it? That's the you can't be there all the time. And by the way, she doesn't want me there all the time either. So
Yeah, I
you're
do. I
actually
do.
you're bridging between two, at
Yeah,
least two, if not many.
I do smile a little bit only because I have a good friend who I've provided a test system for him and he's installed it in his mother's house. And his mother is stubborn. So his mother noticed there were some new internet connected devices. She did have Wi-Fi. Her Wi-Fi largely services a TV box and her cell phone. But then she noticed some new internet connected devices and she was immediately suspicious, saying, and so he had to prove to her, saying, well, this is the kind of data I see. I don't actually, there's no cameras, right? So I don't have, I'm not Big Brother inspecting you. What I can do is offer help when it's needed. And it actually happened to be that she had a fall. So she had a fall, unfortunately, where he was able to detect lack of motion in a very odd space. Now, he was lucky enough that he was able to drive over and found her incapacitated. And good story is she's well now, but it's because of this system that he was able to detect that. So immediately she became a proponent and she's now been telling all of her friends, all of her siblings. And now my friend is saying, Saibal, I need more of these systems. Well, it was just a test system, but immediately there was validation from that one incident.
And you can see it. Go on, Monica. Go on.
One thing that I wanted to, before we move on, is to talk about how this, not only it works, but it doesn't assume any kind of digital sophistication on the person being monitored. So for instance, if I put this in my mom's house, she doesn't need to do anything because she'll go crazy. She is not like, she doesn't want to be responsible. She doesn't know how to do it. And that, I think it's a really important issue because not only, so you want to help people living alone, but oftentimes they're not the most digitally sophisticated people around.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And yeah, I have stories where I know someone has purchased a wearable for their loved one and they'll begrudgingly wear it for a day. The moment the battery runs out, they forget to charge it and it doesn't become a priority. So we don't want to encumber our loved ones with a wearable. We also don't want to equip their home with cameras, to put acoustic sensors. Like there is a lot of detection technology out there, right? We can equip our home with all of this, but then you don't feel like you have this freedom. You feel like you're being surveilled. So the best thing is, like with Wi-Fi Motion, it's largely invisible. I mean, all we need are internet connected devices. And in the case where, let's say your mother or father doesn't have internet connected devices, you can get very low cost ones. You can get smart plugs, you can get speakers, you can get something that blends into the background just to provide that coverage.
And I guess the thinking about typical households, then you mentioned smart speaker there. So the Amazon, the Google, the Apple devices, they all count as the televisions obviously do. Anything else that you're typically seeing? I'm even thinking about around my, obviously we've got laptops and stuff like that, which they won't necessarily have, but I guess
yeah, laptops and phones aren't the best device because they move. So we need stationary devices.
Right.
Typically what we see, we're seeing, as you mentioned, smart assistants. So Amazon devices, Google devices. We're seeing hubs. Doorbells are now becoming increasingly popular. Exterior cameras could work. And then also the plugs, right? So plugs are becoming more and more popular. People are becoming more energy conscious. So the ability to control lights going off and on. Again, this isn't something that we expect our mother or father to worry about. So typically what
sure.
we've seen with a deployment is usually it's the caregiver that comes in the home. They're assessing, because ideally you want coverage of the problem areas. So you want coverage of the bedroom, the bathroom, by the stairwell. So there is some purpose to placement of devices, ideally. And this is where I think the caregiver can help to make sure that we're deployed in such a way that we're getting the best data possible.
And Saibal, are you? I guess the obvious question, if we think about the care that gets wrapped around people, then where you've got a family care, obviously that's just you're feeding that information out to daughter, sister, whatever. But what about the sort of social care environment? You know, certainly in this country, we're having a massive discussion now about healthcare, social care, and the cost of providing it. Are you already getting asked to feed information into a more formal social care and healthcare structures?
Yeah, so we have nursing in Canada, both private and public. And often what will happen is a nurse will attend multiple clients in a day. And they've been asking, so we haven't engaged yet fully, but there's definitely a discussion on think of it as a dashboard. So if as a nurse, I have 5 clients to visit in a week. If I can have these insights in a dashboard, then it will help me it'll help me ask the right questions and to intervene as necessary. And I'm sure the same as where we are, Chris, there is huge burden on our emergency services.
Yeah. So
if we can keep people away from the ERs as much as possible and be preventative, right? How can we ask the questions ahead of time to save a visit to the ER? That's really important.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think that, here we have to sort of think about is like, this is not just, how can I say, the type of reliability that something like this has, it's not such that you do not have any nurse to go and see the person. It's a good tool, but it's not going to replace everything else. So, and I think that we need to keep that in mind, but that doesn't really reduce the benefit of it. It's just the way we need to frame it. And you can imagine a situation where it's not, as you say, you might have a nurse. Obviously, they're still going to see people, but the more information they have, the better off they can serve it. And you can imagine a situation where family and care provider work together. So they both share that information because, for instance, my mom lives in Italy. To know something doesn't really help me because it's the right time. I can't drive there. but
Yes.
somebody local might be helpful, but I still want to know. So there's, I think, a lot of possible use cases that we could think of depending on the needs.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, I mean, we know that the early indicators of declining health, they include change in sleep habits. So the quality of sleep, interruptions, also increase sedentary behavior. So if you're moving less than usual, if you're missing scheduled activities. So for example, if I know my mother loves going on walks every Sunday, but now I'm seeing she's in the home, then this is an early potential risk that we can have a discussion. And if caught early intervention now means there's a reduced risk of a high risk situation. So that high risk situation could be fall, it could be perhaps severe depression. There's a lot of things that we can get early warning for. And you're right, like with a nurse visiting, they may not get these insights. So again, back to my father, who's stubborn and will not report these things. That discussion with the nurse may not be helpful, but this is something that, as you said, Monica, as a caregiver plus the nurse plus my parents, it's a more holistic conversation.
And
Absolutely.
given the you mentioned that the number of ISPs you're working with, any difference in regions, countries that you've come across in terms of their attitude to this, or are you're hoping it's a universal requirement, right? That it's going to be.
Yeah, we're hoping it's a universal requirement. As I mentioned earlier, we are also working on devices that operate without needing the ISP. So that's another avenue to get the technology within the home. I think what we're seeing is outside of North America, there's a greater trend for aging in place. So aging in place is more common in Europe and Asia, Asian countries, whereas North America, it's been less of a norm. Now, as I mentioned, it's slowly becoming that way. So there's an increase now of trending of wanting to age in place. And often what we'll see is in North America, our parents will downsize their home. So their family home, they'll look to downsize into a condo or something that's a little bit more manageable, and they want to stay in as long as possible. And especially I can speak about Canada, but our healthcare isn't in the best situation. So we want to make sure that as much as possible, we're catching things early, they're staying home, and hopefully we'll be as good as other countries in aging in place.
And have I guess the obvious extension from the home is sort of communities for people over a certain age. And any interest from that sort of community level, with not even assisted living, but you can see a sort of a control panel in a nursing home, can't you, where the awareness and the tracking data. I guess so much of it is done manually or visually today, and this would be an obvious tool to help people.
Yeah, it could be like if you think about motion detection per room, and that's in the community living. So definitely that's possible. The other part we haven't really discussed much about, because we've focused on elderly, is there are use cases also where I have a neighbor, for example, whose daughter suffers from depression, yet she wants to be independent, and she's now moving away from home for university. So the parents now, they want to support this independence as much as possible, but they also have a concern. And what they want to make sure is, because there's been a history of kind of being locked in your bedroom when you're home, when you don't feel like going out. And they're also struggling that their child may not self-report those issues. So this is where I have a neighbor asking about this technology, saying, how can I get this deployed to my child's new apartment come this fall? So there's other areas where caregiving applies, like it's not just elderly, and this is the flexibility of this technology.
I think I say independent living, having been a bit, I know many of my co-visually impaired people, live on their own, and they have families that are concerned about them, and obviously they have perhaps social care people who care about it. So I think the notion of independent living is absolutely the key. And yes, I'm sure you can find statistics around the world in terms of, we know we've got the elderly statistics generally available, but those people who live on their own and who may need some additional, not monitoring, but so let's call it support. I think the phrase in my head is peace of independence that just came into my head now, thinking the way you were describing this, that it's peace of mind for all parties concerned, isn't it? Whilst maintaining independence.
Yeah, and I guess it's the number of people living alone in general is getting higher, and so there is even more and more of an issue. There is more people that are elderly or mentally ill or have any other condition that want to live on their own, and they used to be living with larger families. So I think that's part of that. There is people are getting older on average, so that's all of this. Now, so whenever you talk about anything like this, that seems like, well, that's good news anyway, but people need to make money out of it. Do you think that people will pay for it, or what is the sort of the business model that could work? Clearly, so ISP is one possibility, but how do you see that?
So the ISPs is one way. So because your router is already there, so then it's just a matter of what does the caregiver aware ecosystem look like. So our partners will think about taking Wi-Fi sensing as a component of a holistic solution. So that whole holistic solution could include things like door sensors. It could include fall detection using radar technology. It could include, there's some thinking about a virtual assistant. So think of your television turning on and you get to speak to either a live nurse or an AI nurse. So thinking about the whole solution, it's really up to our providers as to how they want to package this. What we do know through some of our engagements is if we think about the plugs, what's interesting is I could buy a 4-pack of smart plugs for around $40. So in terms of capital equipment, it's very low. If I just care about sensing or motion sensing, then I just need 4 plugs. I can place them in my home. I need my internet connection, which hopefully you already have. And then it's all about, if I am using the caregiver app myself, then again, it depends on path to market and how partners want to bundle it, but it's low cost, because if you think about, I'll pivot to security system for a bit. Security system, we all know that those are $50 a month solutions where someone is sitting monitoring your cameras, able to call police, fire, etc. This is much less of a cost to manage. So again, it's really up to our partners to how they want to price this.
What about ease of setup? We're very conscious that we keep talking about lack of digital skills in the marketplace from all sorts of perspectives. I mean, how easy do you envisage it being to set up?
Yeah. So it all comes down to what existing devices you have on the home. So if you go the ISP way, you have a router that's in your home, and you need to make sure that there's stationary internet connected devices throughout your home. I know in the case of my parents, they would not have had many. They would have had probably one computer, an old-fashioned hardwired computer, and they would have probably a cell phone or two. So to that end, you would need some devices, and the devices could be as simple as smart plugs. So a smart plug is, you can get a pack of 4, and I just need to plug them in the outlet. So I don't think so the person doing the setup would be the caregiver. So the caregiver would walk in, they would connect devices if there aren't enough in the home to make sure there's coverage. So with 4 internet connected devices, be it existing smart home assistants or 4 smart plugs, I can get adequate coverage in the home.
Okay.
But you need to have the Wi-Fi access point to support it, right?
Yes. Yeah. So that is a given requirement that the home needs to have Wi-Fi access.
Yeah. But it'll still be so part of it. You might need to have a new access point and then the plugs, but it's all kind of understood. the components are understood from a hardware point of view. Everybody knows what's an AP and what's a plug is.
But is it, I guess, I know now that when I speak to BT, my broadband provider here, they can, when we're logged on, they can see all the devices connected. With your, if your software is installed on there, would they be able to see that there was sufficient to cover the home already?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I smile only because we're working on some of these problems. But yes, they will be, if we're going through an ISP will know through device typing the kinds of devices that are attached to your home. And then they can make a recommendation if you need additional devices, etc. I know that this is a different product offering, but what we're also trying to solve, we're trying to help our ISPs to ensure that their subscribers have adequate coverage in the home. So there's a way to use Wi-Fi motion to understand where there are potentially dead spots in your home for Wi-Fi, where we can make a recommendation proactively for an extender.
That's really useful.
Proper Wi-Fi coverage plus stationary devices will equal Wi-Fi motion throughout the home.
No,
but
it could also
because sorry, but anything which removes the need for a truck roll, right? We know truck rolls are expensive, so anything you can say, and literally, if that sensing was in place, you'd be able to move your. I've got a series of mesh network things that are around the house and in the office here. You could literally physically move it, and the person, either an automated assistant or an assistant, say, yeah, now you've got complete coverage now. That is a very powerful selling tool. I like that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we probably didn't highlight enough is if we look at Wi-Fi sensing alone, how privacy friendly it is, in the sense that there aren't cameras in the home. There isn't anything that's PII, in the sense that I can't identify the individual. I could tell you that there's been motion from the bedroom to the bathroom and back again, without knowing exactly who it is, without needing cameras, etc. So in that sense, this technology is very attractive in order to get those motion insights.
So one question occurs to me is, can you distinguish between, for example, my wife, myself, and my guide dog?
So we do have a way to detect the dog. So depending on if you want to track your dog or not. So we have a way to filter pet motion. As I mentioned earlier, we are all bags of water. So we're different shapes. So pets are lower to the ground. They have a certain signature that we can actually look for. In terms of differentiating yourself and a partner, that becomes a little more trickier. So what we are, again, where this helps is looking at establishing a baseline and anomalies. It'd be difficult to say, this is what Chris is doing and this is what your partner is.
And by the way, just over the weekend, I had family visiting from the US with a 7-month-old baby. I mean, there is an obvious baby monitor application here, isn't there? That movement again, as a, if you've got a nursery, then focusing on that room and what movement's happening in that room.
Yes. Yeah, we have been asked for that as well. So there's a lot of attention being put towards dealing with SIDS and to understand when a baby is not moving. So variety of different technology, Wi-Fi motion could be used to solve this problem as well.
Yeah, there is one thing that I also wanted to point out is that not only the privacy is an issue, but if you want to have cameras in the home, and I have a few, but you never capture everything. The camera captures whatever it's in line of sight.
Yes.
And so that's kind of a limitation unless you have a huge number of cameras, and keeping track of all of them is a real work. So this is actually a nice way, an elegant way to actually only get information you want with the privacy. But what I wanted to do is that we always have the AI question here, but it's kind of more than AI. Is okay. So you collect all the data, so you have all the raw data, and you can detect motion in various ways, but then you can process that further to extract more insights. So back to, like, for instance, Chris' question, if you know that him and his partner have different habits, maybe the signature is the same from a signal point of view, but you might kind of learn something about it that who might be. So there is a lot of work that can be done on top of the data, and I don't know whether you guys are doing a kind of systems, or probably it's like more of a bigger ecosystem of application providers that might be using that data for other more specific.
Yeah, we do have a pretty large data science team, advanced research team. So things I can't really speak about, but there's a lot of testing happening. And for us, it's all about collecting data, understanding exactly what's happening, and what are the insights that Wi-Fi motion can pull out of it, such that it's in a scalable way. So we read a lot of white papers where in a lab environment, you can achieve something, but when it's in the wild west of someone's home with multiple children coming in and out and multiple pets, it becomes more of a challenge. So we're constantly looking at what at scale is possible. And excuse me. So yeah, that's some of the exciting stuff, because now with proper coverage in your home, there's a lot of data that can be collected, and it's just a matter of how partners want to use that data. It could be something as simple as IoT. So IoT could be, I want to turn the HVAC system off or on based on people in the home or lack of people in the home. Could be as simple as, I know you're sitting in the living room and I haven't seen much motion and you've been watching Netflix for a very long time. So perhaps I should send you Peloton ads or something.
Yeah,
So you can think about creative usage of motion.
Well, and energy.
No.
I mean, obviously the energy saving with thinking about that. So, do you see any extension into the business world? I mean, I guess, or you're very much focused on the home and that side of things.
Yeah, we have some partners that are looking at in enterprises. So think about if I have warehouse and there's spaces where I need to monitor, and perhaps a camera is frowned upon for certain privacy reasons. It is better than a PIR sensor in that PIR sensors, first, it's very obvious that there's a PIR sensor. Also, there are constraints in terms of placement relative to windows, and making sure that there's power to it, etc. So there are constraints of PIRs that we can do a much better job. So these are being investigated. Again, if you're purpose building for a specific use case, then there's a lot of flexibility in what you can do.
Now, another question is that people might say, well, that's all very good, but do we need to, is this a proprietary system? And my understanding is that there are others. There is a WBA as now a working group on sensing. So can you tell us a little bit about the bigger ecosystem here?
Yeah, so part of the working group is to make sure that 8211BF, there's Wi-Fi sensing as a component of that. What that means is chipset vendors and the hardware providers are making CSI accessible. And by CSI being accessible, it now means that Wi-Fi sensing can be done much quicker. We still need the algorithms, right? So Cognitive will always have a play in that. But as this becomes part of the standard, it now means we have more devices that we can work with, and development time gets reduced greatly. So that's one of the advantages of the Wi-Fi sensing group.
So basically, you'd have a sort of like a standard-based, from a hardware point of view, a standard-based, but then you'd have software running on top to extract, to basically make that data useful.
Yeah, right now we have relationships with Broadcom, Qualcomm, Quantenna, MediaTek, MaxLinear. Our access to CSI differs. So not everyone has implemented this in the right way. So we look forward to the future where through 802.11bf, when that standard finally becomes closed, that our path to doing these integrations become much more quicker and without specialty and hurdles.
Now, let me ask you a timeline question here. So the core technology is there,
Yes.
deployed and everything, but we don't see that much in terms of the services that we've been talking about. And clearly that always takes time before you actually get there. How do you see the timeline here?
Yes, good question. So with HomeAware, as I mentioned, we are through a partner. We have about 2.8 million deployments. We are about to launch with a major North American tier one. I will not name them, but that launch is going to happen towards the end of this year. So this now means Wi-Fi Motion is running on routers of approximately 11 million households in North America. We're working on similar engagements in the UK. Some of the large tier one ISPs, not just the UK, but all of Europe. We will see Wi-Fi Motion kind of spread. So I think what we need first is people to understand Wi-Fi Motion and people to understand the implications of having this on the router. ISPs, their number one concern is Wi-Fi performance. The last thing they need is a third-party algorithm running on this device that takes down Wi-Fi. So luckily, we take a very small footprint, but it takes time for these ISPs to do testing, to have that comfort level that everything's going to work well. So we are engaged with most of the global tier one ISP providers. We will see our home insight solution be somewhat ubiquitous, hopefully by the end of this year. So that's kind of your base. The next thing is to get people thinking about caregiver aware. So we are working with, that's the ISP route. We have other avenues where they are looking at forgetting about the ISP and doing it themselves using smart plugs. And so that hopefully we will start seeing some solutions before the end of the year as well.
Excellent.
Yeah. So basically for the plug solution, where you do not need an ISP, you can basically deploy it anywhere as long as you have
Wi-Fi.
a sort of intermediary that in the same way that you use it for any other smart home device.
Yes.
So you're not really dependent. It could be in any country as long as you have Wi-Fi.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Wi-Fi and router connection that would work.
Yes, that's correct.
Great. Well,
That's
thank you. Thank you for opening my eyes to sensing, because I hadn't come across this before. I tell you, there used to be a company called Apicall that was acquired by Intel many years ago. Yeah. That got into that, which was the similar sort of thing to this. I'm really pleased that it's developing and that much broader deployment is coming into play.
Excellent.
Are you going to wrap us up, Monica?
Yes, well, thank you so much. It was great talking to you, and now we will all know, and hopefully we'll get Wi-Fi sensing in our home soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure speaking with you, Monica and Chris.
Take care. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye now.